Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And, here it is Tuesday. Took a long weekend and took off yesterday to celebrate the 4th, which is actually the 5th. So anyway, welcome back. I do appreciate you being with me. We are continuing our examination of the Olivet Discourse. We are specifically focused on the return of the absent master. As I've suggested to you before, the parable by Jesus in Matthew 25:14 and following about a man who was going to go into a far country. He gathered his servants together. He gave talents to them and told them to do the business until he returned. After a long time, he returned and he rendered judgment on them. Well, we are told by those who divide the Olivet Discourse into a discussion of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 and the end of the Old Covenant age, and then into a discussion of the end of the current Christian age. We are told that Jesus' statement, "But of that day and hour knows no man, no, not the angels," Matthew 24 and verse 36, that absolutely has to change the subject. The problem of it is that when we come, number one, that comment, that argument, lifts that passage completely out of its chronological context. Jesus made that statement before the sending of the revelatory Spirit, and that revelatory Spirit, when he came, pardon me, still have some hangover from that crazy, strep throat. Matter of fact, my throat's been sore the last 2 days. Anyway, it removes that passage from any consideration of the fact that after Jesus' ascension, the Father sent the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit guided the apostles, number one, into all truth, number two, to understand the judgment to come, and number three, to understand things to come. Therefore, when we come to the New Testament epistles, written by the apostles, inspired of the Holy Spirit, sent by the Father who knew the day and the hour, we are not reading comments that were merely comments about, we hope that the coming of the Lord is at hand. They're not comments that simply say, we think the coming of the Lord is at hand. No. These were directly inspired statements by men who had received the Holy Spirit from the Father, who knew the day and the hour of Christ's return, and he was revealing that time to them. We have spent some time so far in Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 to 3. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to him to show to his servants the things which must shortly come to pass. I've shared with you how some former preterists and others distort the language of that text. They have that text saying, John wasn't writing, the Father wasn't speaking about things that must soon come to pass. He was just simply saying that one of these days, by and by, it may be 20 gazillion years away. But when the Lord finally gets around to coming, he's going to come rapidly. He's going to ride the fastest cloud out of heaven. Now, I've shared with you Luke chapter 18, verse 8. Will not God avenge his elect who cry out to him day and night? Now, listen, folks, here's something that you have to understand. Jesus' response, verily I say unto you, he will avenge them speedily, in Taxei. That is a direct echo of Deuteronomy 32:43. That predicted that in Israel's last days, the Lord would avenge the blood of his saints. So, if you're going to put the avenging of the blood of the martyrs off into our future, then you are thereby putting Israel's last days into our future. And you know what? Virtually every one of the former full preterists, I should say, who deny the genuine imminence of Taxei, at the same time, they tell us, guess what? I mean, the inconsistency and the desperation of the former full preterists in their attempts to try to negate the time statements are absolutely amazing. So here's what I mean. On the one hand, they tell us, okay, the law of Moses was nailed to the cross. It was abrogated. It was annulled. It was taken out of the way. Well, that means that God was through with Israel at the cross. Oh, but wait. They go to Luke chapter 18. They go to the book of Revelation, which is about the vindication of the martyrs. And oh, by the way, Deuteronomy 32:43 is cited in Revelation 19 and verse 2. And they put that event off in our future. Well, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. If the avenging of the blood of the martyrs in fulfillment of Deuteronomy 32:43 is yet in our future, that means Deuteronomy 43, and thus the entirety of the law of Moses, remains valid until the so-called end of time, until sometime in the future in the judgment of the persecuting city, Babylon. Wherever you put the avenging of the blood of the martyrs, it is there that you have the final fulfillment of the Old Covenant, the final fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Israel. Not the spiritual Israel of the church, but the Israel to whom the promises were made in the Old Testament. And by the way, you will want to be sure to watch my 3 lessons in the Preterist Pilgrim Weekend that right now is coming up very soon. And my lessons deal with Revelation as the fulfillment of Deuteronomy chapter 32. And one of my lessons is focused specifically and in depth on the motif of the avenging of the blood of the martyrs in Israel's last days. Okay, so we got to move on here to another, and by the way, Sam Frost, former preterist, attempted, and I use that word attempted with emphasis, he failed miserably, to respond to my videos on Taxei, saying, this proves Preston doesn't know the Greek. Well, I've never claimed to be a Greek expert, never have. But you know what? My library is full of critical commentators, men who do understand the Greek extremely well. Here's David Awney. Here is G.K. Beale. Here is Peter Lightheart. Here is James D.G. Dunn. Here is Richard Longenecker. Now look, each one of these men, and I mean, look, that's just a tiny sampling of the critical commentaries that I have in my library. And not one of these world-renowned Greek scholars, not one of them, say that Taxei means rapidly as opposed to imminent. As a matter of fact, next to the last use of Taxei that we want to focus on is Romans 16:20, where Paul says, and now the God of peace shall crush Satan under your feet shortly. Now, those who want to deny the imminence factor will say, well, Satan is destroyed at the end of the millennium. The end of the millennium is off in our future. So all that can possibly mean is that when God finally gets around to crushing Satan, he will do it rapidly. Well, let me ask you to think about this. Here is Paul writing to Roman Christians being persecuted by the Jews. They, like those in Luke 18, like those in Revelation 6, 9 and following, like those in Hebrews 10, on and on, those saints being persecuted for their faith, we are supposed to believe they don't care about when their vindication was going to come, in spite of the fact that Revelation chapter 6, verse 9 has them saying, How long, O Lord, will you not avenge us on those who dwell on the earth? Were they concerned about how God would avenge them, as in rapidly? Or were they concerned about when? Well, the Greek is, how long, O Lord, until you do this? So the point is, these former preterists and those who want to deny the imminence, in effect, they want to destroy the humanity of those suffering saints of the first century being persecuted for their faith, and we're supposed to believe that God sent the Holy Spirit to tell them, now look, I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to avenge you. Maybe thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years away, but I just want to give you the reassurance that when I finally do get around to doing it, I'm going to do it rapidly. And they're sitting there in their homes. They're losing their homes. They're losing their possessions. They're being beaten. They're being ostracized. They're being killed. And they're going, oh, boy, it's so great to know that we may not be vindicated in our lifetime at all. That's not important. It's not important that we know when. It's just important to know it will be rapidly when it finally comes. Folks, human beings don't think like that. And yet that's what these anti-preterists want you and me to believe. But anyway, got to hurry here. Okay, let me read a little bit from James D.G. Dunn, who is an acknowledged Greek authority. Commenting on Romans 16:20, he says, the hope of Satan being crushed underfoot is part of a larger eschatological hope for the final binding or defeat of the angelic power hostile to God. He gives a bunch of sources. Then he says, it is hard to diminish the strong eschatological note here and the note of imminence implied in Taxei. Compare Luke 18:8. Compare Revelation 1:1. Compare Revelation 22:6 and 7. And particularly Romans 13:11-12. Unquote. So Mr. Dunn obviously completely, radically disagrees with Mr. Frost, and it would cause us to ask the question, who knows the Greek? James D.G. Dunn or Sam Frost? Then we have Longenecker in the New International Critical Greek Testament Commentary. Here is his translation. Here is his translation of Revelation chapter 1, of Romans 16:20. The God of peace will soon, not rapidly, soon crush Satan under your feet. And thus, when Mr. Frost says, well, Preston doesn't know the Greek, okay, that's fine, cool. I don't have a problem saying that. Never have had a problem saying that. But you know what? I know what the Greek sources, and I know what the Greek scholars say, and they tell us that those who deny the imminence of Taxei are not Greek scholars. And they're not telling you or me the truth. Okay, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you so very, very much. Now listen, if you want, what do I do with it? Okay, anyway, there it is. I thought I had it laying right here. If you want an in-depth study of Taxei and what it means for the return of the absent master, and that's what this is all about, ladies and gentlemen. Get a copy of my book, Who Is This Babylon? Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Go to the store, order the book, and say, Don, I saw your offer on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll refund your shipping. That will save you $5. Okay, thank you much for joining me. I'll see you on the flip side.